a while now. When were you planning to step out?
Funny. I was gonna ask when you were planning to stop shooting my life without permission.
You've been in my frame for a while now. When were you planning to step out? Funny. I was going to ask when you were planning to stop shooting my life without permission. In the sweltering haze of Jakarta's Kota Tua Square, Jun-woo stood paralyzed, staring at the woman before him. The adrenaline from chasing a pickpocket through the labyrinthine alleys had barely faded when she pulled off her helmet, releasing a crown of gorgeous afro hair. As she smiled, Jun-woo felt the suffocating loneliness had brought from Seoul evaporate in the humid air. Her eyes held a fire hotter than the Indonesian sun. The roar of the plaza faded into a dull hum. Nadia reached out, playfully tugging at Jun-woo's damp collar. Wake up, stranger in this city. If you blink, you're history. Her English was smooth, accented with a rhythmic lilt that made Jun-woo's skin tingle where her fingers brushed against him. He realized then that he hadn't just stumbled into a new city, but into something far more volatile. Jun-woo gently caught her wrist, his pulse thrumming. Look, thanks for the save, but I need you to delete those photos. I am not exactly looking to be found. Nadia tilted her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Men with secrets usually get eaten alive in Jakarta. But I like the look in your eyes. Tell you what, for today, I'll be your guardian angel. Don't push me, Nadia. You have no idea how close you are to snapping the last thread of my restraint. It's 100 degrees and raining. Who has the energy for restraint? A sudden tropical monsoon slammed into the city, drumming violently against the rusted tin roof above them. A jagged bolt of lightning ripped through the sky, bleaching the world white for a split second, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the very ground. They huddled under a ledge barely wide enough for one. The downpour created a translucent curtain, sealing them off from the rest of the world. With every flash of light, they drew closer until there wasn't a breath of space left between them. A stray droplet from the edge of Nadia's afro fell onto Jun-woo's cheek. He didn't look away, his gaze was locked onto hers, heavy with a hunger he'd tried so hard to bury. Nadia met his stare head on, unblinking. Is this how all Seoul men talk? With their eyes? Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the roar of the rain. Jun-woo's fist clenched. The air was thick, suffocating, and the heat radiating from her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever felt. Jun-woo slid his hand around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The scent of rain and her exotic perfume clouded his senses. Why did you help me? You could have just kept riding. Nadia leaned into him, her hand tracing the damp fabric of his sleeve. My lens doesn't lie. I saw a sadness in you so deep, I was afraid if I left you alone, you'd simply vanish into the shadows of this city. Take your hands off her. She's with me, and she's everything. The scene was a lavish rooftop bar overlooking the glittering Jakarta skyline. Amidst the sea of silk and diamonds, Nadia stood tall in a minimalist black dress Jun-woo had chosen for her. When a group of entitled socialites began mocking her background, Jun-woo appeared like a ghost from her dreams. Dressed in a sharp, bespoke navy suit, he exuded the cold, lethal charisma of the elite executive he once was. He ignored the stunned hecklers, his focus entirely on Nadia. I am sorry. Did I keep you waiting? His voice was a low caress, but his eyes promised hell to anyone who dared breathe a word against her. They retreated to the edge of the terrace where the Mona's tower glowed in the distance. The city was beautiful, but the shadows creeping up from his past were growing darker by the minute. Suddenly, Jun-woo's phone vibrated, a call from headquarters in Seoul. The people who had framed him had tracked him down. The romantic escape was officially over, a war had begun. Nadia squeezed his hand, her eyes fierce. Don't you dare look back. We know these streets better than they ever will. As long as we move together, we won't get lost. You told me that in Korea, wearing this means a promise of forever. I want to be your forever, Jun-woo. Nadia stood before the mirror in a hanbok made of vibrant crimson silk. The contrast between the deep red of the traditional Korean dress and her rich, dark skin was breathtaking. Jun-woo watched her, his throat tight with emotion. This dress, it's the most precious thing I own. My mother had it made from the finest silk she could find. But the dream shattered when black sedans pulled up outside. The men from Seoul had arrived with a chilling ultimatum: return now and face the charges. or we ensure this woman and her family disappear. Jun-woo's blood ran cold. Hidden behind the corridor, Nadia heard every word. She realized her love had become his greatest vulnerability. In the dead of night, while Jun-woo was fitfully asleep, Nadia took off the crimson hanbok and folded it with heartbreaking precision. On top of the silk, she left the weathered hair tie she always wore. To save him, she had to lose him. She slipped out into the humid Jakarta night, disappearing into the labyrinth of alleys she knew so well. I tore up the ticket. A life in Seoul without you isn't a life, it's a sentence. At Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, the final call for the Seoul flight echoed through the terminal. Surrounded by corporate suits, Jun-woo stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at the old hair tie in his palm and let out a dry, defiant laugh. He ripped the boarding pass into shreds, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like snow, and sprinted toward the exit. Nadia sat on a bench in Kota Tua, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She assumed he was already thousands of feet in the air. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to find Jun-woo, drenched in sweat and gasping for air, but with a look of absolute clarity in his eyes. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to leave," she cried. Jun-woo knelt before her. "My home is wherever you are, Nadia. Seoul was just a museum of my failures. I am staying here to start a real life. With you." Under the violet hues of a Jakarta sunset, they collided in a desperate embrace. Jun-woo buried his face in her hair, breathing her in. Months later, a small gallery called the Blue Night opened its doors in a quiet corner of the city. On the main wall hung a massive portrait of Nadia in her crimson hanbok, smiling. Jun-woo stood by her side, camera in hand, finally at peace. They had learned that their differences weren't obstacles, they were the very colors that made their world worth living in.
This story unfolds as a self-sacrificing romance, in which the protagonist gives up their privileges to choose their true self and love the red. Hanbok symbolizes the fusion of two cultures and an eternal promise, adding a touch of visual poignancy. True love does not begin by trying to force the other person into your world, but with the courage to willingly step into theirs. Have you ever experienced a love so fateful that you were willing to give up everything for it?
Please note that this story is a work of fiction.